Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and good morning, and it's time for another edition of the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. I'm Gus Kattengell, joined along, as always, by Mr. Jim Eichenhofer of NewOrleansPelicans.com. Jim, good morning to you, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Gus. How are you this morning? Could be better.
I'm still trying to get used to the whole daylight savings time thing. Are you a fan or not? I mean, we've got more important, pressing things like games and stuff, but this is a very key thing.
Yeah. I'm not a fan in the fall because I don't like it getting darker earlier.
Okay.
And I also don't like it when the sun is shining at 6 a.m. and I'm like, I'm trying to sleep here. What is this?
Got you. See, I get up every morning, 6:15, 6:30, walk the dog, get out there. When it's pitch black, it's hard, I guess, to wake up that way. Mm-hmm. I'm with you, though. Getting dark early makes it seem like it's a weird weekend for me to get going. I don't know if I prefer one way or the other. What I do prefer is a much cooler fall. I'm tired of mid-80s.
Yeah, these 80s are. I love warm weather, but I can totally understand that the people who are like, man, we just went through like 5-6 months of this. Why are we still doing this in November? But
says the New Yorker. Exactly.
But daylight savings I much prefer in the spring because there's that day, that Sunday where they move the clock forward and all of a sudden it's lighter later. That's almost the moment when I'm like, oh yes, summer's coming. It's on its way.
I understand, sir. I understand. 126-111 was the final last night in the first of a back-to-back as the Pels will take on the Trailblazers for the third time this season, coming up at a very late 8:30 tip time. Don't ask, just that's the time. You have a reason. What's the reason?
Right. The first thing I would tell people is it's not our fault.
It is not our fault.
It's not Gus and my decision.
No one wants to tip off at 8:30.
It's not even the Pelicans' decision. No, this is a league thing where they're starting all the games 15 minutes apart. All 30 teams in the league are playing. And as a result, the Pelicans got slotted in for an 8:30 home game. So don't send us any angry emails or tweets. We had nothing to do with it.
We had nothing to do with it. Anyway, as we mentioned, the Hawks coming out with the win. Pels battling back and forth. There's undermanned, and then, Jim, there's where the Pelicans are. Zion Williamson was a late scratch before the game. Hamstring soreness. We'll see if he plays today or this week. Well, that's all we got. It's hamstring soreness. So he was out after having a spectacular game on Friday, which we can go back to and talk of, which was a very big win. When you look at that game back on Friday with this team being undermanned, he and B.I. did what in your mind?
I mean, they led the team and they took over. I mean, I think that was the best performance of the season for the Pelicans. Probably the best win that they've had when you factor in how many players were out. But I thought Brandon and Zion definitely played off of each other really well. Also, I mean, I don't know what the number was, but it seemed like there was a bunch of assists between each other going back and forth. Zion and B.I. both had a bunch of assists in that game. So that was really the ideal situation, not in terms of how many guys were out, but when Zion and B.I. get to play together, what that can look like.
Yeah, no doubt. This is what Willie Green had to say about that game.
It's what they're capable of doing night in and night out. It really is. And, we saw it on full display tonight. They will continue to take a step in the right direction of doing what we saw. It'll be some moments that it doesn't happen, but, we're grateful for the win tonight. I'm grateful for those guys, their leadership and their spirit. They were cheering on their teammates. Not a lot of frustration out there, just moving on to the next play, and that's what it's going to take for us over the next few weeks.
One of the best things I loved about that game, Jim? Dunks. Dunks here, dunks there, dunks everywhere.
Lob to Z. Yes, sir. Coming left baseline, he caught that thing top of the box and slammed it in with two hands. Oh, and Messi just blocked Miles Turner. Turner went for a hammer, and the rookie said, no, you don't, veteran.
Eve says, this is my bayou. You cannot have that.
Eve of destruction. Mathurin took 3 steps, drives in, and Tice blocked the shot. Taken by Williamson. Get it to Tice, up top 3.
There you go.
Tice, baby.
There you go. I like that.
Pels up 70-64. Ingram with a deflection and a steal. 3-on-2. B.I. center of the lane. No look, Evening. Oh, he just postered Miles Turner. Soaring rookie. Right hand hammer.
Mr. Messi.
Boston's free, right wing three, hit another one! Ingram goes behind the back, drives to the dotted line, spins left, and flushes it down!
B.I. with the punch.
Brandon.
Oh, you got the two-man game.
Two-man game with Zion. Bounce beat the C!
Yeah, boy!
Politely dunks it in!
Look, I know it was 2 games ago, but there was so much of that game that I think if you're a Pels fan, it's easy to be like, man, all these injuries, we're going to win. When they get healthy, you can see what this team is capable of. But you heard Willie Green talk about B.I. and Zion. Your thoughts on Messi, though, so far this season, getting his first start yesterday?
Yeah, I tweeted during the game or after the game that was he had 4 points, 10 rebounds, and 1 block. That was the loudest 4-10 in one line that you'll ever see or hear. And I mean, you could kind of tell from the highlights that you just played too that it got Graf out of his seat. Maybe we'll have a Graf out of his seat meter. I mean, that was impressive. How many plays that Eve had that were just jaw dropping and ones that I'm sure ended up on ESPN later in the evening.
Yeah, no doubt. So obviously, look, you get to the game yesterday. The Hawks had injuries. The Pels have had injuries, and obviously no Zion. That's a lot to try to overcome. It just is. Hawkins dealing with back soreness. He had some points, but you can tell he wasn't his normal self. When you look at that game last night, 126, 111, they were down 5, Jim. Down 5. And then the turnover thing happened. There were 3, I think, if not 4 straight turnovers at about the 7-6 minute mark. And then it was over from that standpoint, an 18-4 run.
Yeah, it seemed like all or most of those were in the backcourt too, where it was like somebody picked off a pass for Atlanta or took the ball out of somebody's hands and ran it the other way and got a layup or a dunk in transition. Yeah, that part of the game, I mean, whether it was kind of the mental fatigue of what the Pelicans are up against or whether even somewhat physically fatigued where you got guys that are playing roles that they're not accustomed to and they're playing a ton of minutes. It did seem like at the end of the game that there was definitely some tiredness that came into. You just saw a few passes that didn't make sense, the kind of passes you see from people when they're not sharp. And so that definitely broke open the game for Atlanta at the end.
This is what Jordan Hawkins had to say.
Just turnovers. I had a turnover. Then that started like the stretch of turnovers we had, and they just ran out with that lead. Made a big run at the end of the third.
One of the things as well after the game, Brandon Ingram was asked in the locker room if he feels his team is sort of snake bit. I mean, you have that great performance Friday, and then Zion doesn't play on Sunday. I love his answer, to be honest with you, because you can kind of hear, I guess, the state of the locker room.
A little bit, but it's all a plan. God got a plan. I don't know the plan, but I'm just living in it. And eventually we'll get healthy. Eventually everything will come together and we'll be all right.
I wanted to play that because I do think it's somewhat important to do this. Look, and you've heard it from head coach Willie Green. I played it, I think, last week to you when he was like, hey, are you concerned? Are you worried about losing so many games in a row? He goes, not one bit. And I think a lot of that has to deal with knowing that at some point, actually, this is what he had to say back on the 30th.
No, not on my part. It's no concern.
Right? And it's because you know that at some point you're going to get healthy. And at some point when that happens, it's going to be a pretty decent team. And it's going to be a tough team to beat. So you just got to get through it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, this is something that they've dealt with before here where they've had multiple guys out. And all you can do is just kind of push forward and hopefully find some silver linings, find some of the positives of specific players that we'll probably get into a little bit more later, specific guys who are playing more now than they would have. I mean, there's a bunch of, you could go down the list. I mean, there's players who were in the rotation who are now starting. There's guys who weren't in the rotation at all and probably weren't going to be in it anytime soon who now are coming off the bench and playing significant minutes and contributing in a real positive way. So, I mean, that's all you can do is just the guys that are playing, take advantage of it. And then when you start to have this, hopefully, stream of players coming back in over stretches in the next month plus or whatever it is, the guys that have gotten the opportunity to play more are in better position, and now you can count on them even more when you get into, December, January, and the rest of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see what takes place. Again, they take place. They take on the Trailblazers tonight, which we'll get to here towards the end of the podcast. But Jim, all right, so you want to take a broader look, obviously, as to where we are here as we get closer to the first 10-game stretch of the season. Had a 4-game road trip, now basically in the middle of a 4-game homestand before we close up that first 10-game stretch. I think it's Orlando on Friday that would do that. So what are some things that stood out to you so far?
Yeah, I mean, I said before the season, hopefully to go 7-3 in the first 10 games, but that was also at the point where there were some injuries, but not a whole slew of them. So, I mean, obviously you kind of have to readjust your goals and your expectations and what's realistic for the team over the first 10 games. But, I mean, to me, it was interesting. I was talking to a couple of the writers at the beginning of the game on Sunday against the Hawks, and a couple of the guys were saying, we're looking down at the court and looking at who's in the lineup and who's going to be in the rotation, and a couple of guys were like, this has got to be the first time that this has ever happened to an NBA team where already at this point in the regular season you have so many key guys out. And I looked at them and I said, my young friends, sit back and listen, and I'll tell you a tale. I remember I would kind of compare what's happening right now to the beginning of the 2015-16 season. So Pelicans make the playoffs in 2015. They come back. There's really high expectations, but you have a bunch of guys injured on opening night. So you're playing it. It's the Golden State Warriors ring night. You have Nate Robinson in your starting lineup, who I think they had just signed maybe like a week earlier. And he wasn't in total condition to start the NBA season, but he's in the starting lineup. They had just signed Ish Smith like a day or two before that game, and they had to play him 25, 30 minutes because Nate Robinson wasn't totally ready to be a starter minutes-wise at that point. But I think there's a bunch of differences between that year and now, though. And one of them is that in that position that they were in, the Pelicans were just trying to Band-Aid, find some veteran guys that, like Kendrick Perkins started at center that opening game. They're trying to find some veteran guys that could just get
Kendrick Perkins, by the way.
That could get them through it. Whereas I think now you have Jordan Hawkins that you're developing, that you just took in the lottery last year. You have Yves Missi that you picked 21st this year. You have other young guys. It's a total difference in terms of what you can get out of, I think, a stretch where you have a bunch of key guys injured and sidelined. That is positive. I don't know how much they were going to get out of, okay, Kendrick Perkins is playing 30 minutes now at that stage of his career. It wasn't like we were going to see something brand new from him. Whereas I think they can, just take advantage of this more. I mean, obviously this is dreadful to have this many injuries, but you have to try to find the positives. But I think from a big picture standpoint too, the way that I look at the start right now, we talked about how they're 3-4 record-wise right now. They started that season in 2015-16, 1-11. The following season, they also had a bunch of injuries to start, and they started 2-10. To me, the goal is you can't put yourself in that kind of hole. Luckily, they've already won 3 games, so at least they have that ahead of those teams. But the big thing is that, are we expecting them to go out and win every game by 30 right now with the players that they have not available? No. But it's a matter of, you got to be able to get the wins here and there when you have the opportunity. You got to be able to take advantage of every possible situation so that when Trey Murphy, DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, when all those guys come back, you're still in a position where it's like, okay, maybe we're not exactly where we want to be, or maybe we're not at the point where we hoped we'd be when the season started, but at least all we have to do is just put together a nice run, and we're right back in the mix as far as top 10 in the West and competing with a bunch of these other teams that are either off to better starts or also have some kind of obstacles that they're trying to battle through right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you and I were talking about this yesterday in the studio that we might bring up at this point. But you look at the standings, and again, it is November 4th.
It's quite early, yes.
It's very early. The Pelicans are 11th. I get that. They're 3-4. The Grizzlies are 4-3 in 6th. Dallas has 4 wins. Lakers have 4 wins. It's just one more win than you have, So
right.
To your point, look, I get it. OKC is 6-0. It's only 3 more wins. I'm looking at it like that. I know it's 4 more losses because they're 6-0, but the point is, it's not. because I guess you can get the sense and feeling the season's getting away from you, or all these injuries, you're never going to win. But I think you brought up a good point. You're not just, hey, we need a body to play. The bodies that are filling in for the guys that aren't playing aren't bad.
Right.
And they're developing. You mentioned Brandon Boston Jr. You mentioned what Hawkins being able to do, Messi being able to do and get those minutes. And I think all of that is valuable. So to your point, I think it's just different. It's just different than throwing out guys that, it's not Jose Alvarado 3 years ago where he hadn't been working on his shot and being a ball handler, being a team leader. He's a guy trying to earn a contract, and
right.
I think they've done a good job with two-way players.
Yeah, for sure. One thing, too, I think it's even more important to win home games than it ever has been. You got to be able to take advantage of that. But, you bring up the two-way contract players. I think this is interesting. I was just looking at some stuff this morning on NBA.com. So, obviously, we're only 2 weeks into the regular season. But the Pelicans are number 1 in the NBA in points scored by players on two-way contracts. They have this stat is kind of interesting, also a little depressing to be honest with you, but nonetheless, they have 55 points scored from two-way contract players so far. Between obviously that's mostly Brandon Boston and Jamal Cain, but Trey Jemison a little bit as well has played. There's 13 teams in the NBA that have 0 points from two-way contract players. So 55. It's almost half the league that hasn't had any scoring production from a guy on a two-way contract. And the Pelicans have 55 points. Also, New Orleans is second in minutes played by two-way contract guys. Boston has 66 minutes. Kane has 54. Jemison has 5. So that's 125 minutes. There's 5 teams in the NBA that have 0 minutes, that have not seen a two-way contract player even get on the court. And the Pelicans have 125 between their 3 two-way contract. So I say all that just to illustrate, what the situation of the Pelicans in terms of, the vast majority of the teams in the league, including the Pelicans, went into the season saying, we have these guys on two-way contracts who are we're going to develop. They're going to have to spend a lot of time in the G League because the way the two-way contracts are set up, you're only allowed to be on an NBA roster for part of the season. You can't be here all year, or they have to convert you to a standard contract. So, it just kind of shows you that I think Brandon Boston has been impressive in the very short amount of time that he's been here. Jamal Cain has contributed as well. We like Trey Jemison. He hasn't gotten as much of an opportunity because of some of the depth that they have at center and the way that Yves Messi has really blossomed so early. But it's such an unexpected kind of development that you have to go to those guys. And it just shows you, David Griffin has talked about this a bunch over the last few years, that the coaching staff has done a really good job of getting through situations that are not ideal, where it's like, okay, plan A, we have to throw that out because we have a bunch of guys injured. Plan B, we only can do that for a game, and then a bunch more guys get hurt. And now we're down to plan G, H, maybe M. Yeah. And you just have to make
below the alphabet than you would.
Right. Yeah. You have to just make the best of it. And but I think they've done a good job. I think this weekend was particularly for Brandon Boston was impressive, that he was able to step in totally unexpectedly. All of a sudden, it's like, not only are you playing, but we need you to play really well. And I think he did a good job with that, especially in the Pacers game.
Yeah, and to your point, when you bring up the numbers and the stats and the points and where they are, it just kind of tells you where you are. And I think, look, again, and I know they lost yesterday, but it's something we talked about in postgame. You were within 5. You're being competitive, and that and that's the thing that I think it does tell you the staff. It tells you who the players are getting, and they got Jalen Noel, yesterday.
Yep. Yeah. He got to play Jalen Noel. He got to play a little bit in the last.
He's had no
4 minutes of the game. Right.
Just sit here. Welcome.
Just get on the court and see what you can do.
But that's the point. It's like, and I'm chuckling and laughing because you can't plan for this.
No.
Well, let me correct myself. I think they're doing a good job of planning for this. They clearly have a plan in that if we have an injury, there's a list of players that we like. There's a list of players that we think they can help. And they're helping, to your point that you just brought up. This isn't just, let's just hope this person can play.
Right.
They've contributed. They've put up points. They've put up minutes. So I think they're doing as good as you can to try to field a competitive basketball team. Folks, your all-pro defensive player in Herb Jones is out. C.J. McCollum is out.
Right.
DeJounte Murray is out. Trey Murphy hasn't played yet. I mean, those names, they sell jerseys.
Right.
I mean, they sell jerseys.
And it's like you could go through the list and be like, okay, who's the best point guard on the team? Oh, he's out. Who's the best three-point shooter? Oh, he's out. Who's the all-NBA defensive guy? He's out. I mean, it's all these different categories where
and you
have
only play
someone,
5 at a time.
Right. All these different categories where you have someone that leads the way. The guy who leads the way isn't available. So, and then when Zion is out last night, it compounds that even more.
Let's go back to what you said at the very beginning of the season. Was it the top 100 players in the NBA?
Right.
And the Pelicans
6 of them.
Okay. Well, how many of those guys are not playing right now?
Well, Sunday night, 5 of them didn't play. It was just Brandon Ingram. Okay. So, I mean, hopefully...
So you think it makes a difference?
Yeah. I would say that would makes it a little bit easier to coach. It's amazing how much better of a coach you look like when you have 6 of 100, the top 100 players available instead of 1.
Yeah, no doubt. What else has stood out to you?
Yeah, I think, the fourth quarter in particular of the game against Atlanta, to me, was kind of representative of some of the things that we're going to have to keep an eye on over the next however long stretch we're talking about, where they're super shorthanded and they only have, 1 or 2 of their main starters or however you want to describe it available. We played earlier the clips of Jordan Hawkins talking about the turnovers that led to Atlanta points. I think that's one thing the Pelicans are going to have to try to reduce how many points off turnovers opponents are getting. They're going to have to try to cut down on the fast break points that opponents are getting. And those two things that often are tied together. If you turn the ball over a lot of times it's hard to keep other teams from running back against you and getting easy baskets. But, I mean, so far, this was a little surprising to me. The Pelicans are 14th in opponent points off turnovers. I thought that would be a little lower. But they're 23rd in opposing fast break points. And that's been something I think that has hurt them a little bit too. Just getting back in transition, there's been times when you can see the coaches, yelling out there to the guys, you got to get back on defense. It's one thing to give up baskets after turnovers, but it's another, if you score a basket and the other team is still able to run back at you, which I think we saw in the Indiana game in particular, even though that was a really good performance overall. The Pacers were a team that they're going to shove it down your throat no matter what. They just have that mentality. A couple other quick points too, just things to keep an eye on. Pelicans are 20th in points in the paint. They were 10th last season. And now obviously you say they've only played 7 games and Zion's missed 2 of them. So how much of a factor would that stat change if he had played in every game, or if he had, been kind of in rhythm and looked more like Zion? So I would think that will improve, but I think with the offense, the way the Pelicans have it, where it is so geared towards Zion, if they got to get higher in those rankings, they got to be more like they were 10th ranked last season as opposed to 20th. It's going to be hard for the offense to be consistent if they're in the bottom half of the league in paint points. And last thing, we talked about how the goal was to take 40 3-pointers a game. Right now, they're 27th in the league in 3-point attempts. They're averaging 32.1. So, I think they're getting a little bit closer to that 40 goal, but they still have a ways to go. But it's interesting, too, that, they're 19th in 3-point makes per game, but they're 11th in percentage. So we still see, once again, the way it was last year, where the percentage shows you that you should be taking more than you're taking. So, but with the personnel that they have available, where they don't have C.J. McCollum and Trey Murphy, that's a bigger challenge to be able to get up more threes. But I think to Brandon Ingram's credit, he's been doing a good job of that. He took 8 last night, made 4, and he's been definitely making a conscious effort to get up those 3-point shots. Jordan Hawkins as well. But I think they're going to need some other guys to join in so that they can get all of those rates up. Like I said, they're making them at a decent rate, but they're still not taking them at a level that's not in the bottom 5 of the league.
Matter of fact, Brandon Ingram was asked about that in the locker room last night.
Just taking the shots the defense give me, trying to work on the speed of my shot, getting them off a little bit faster, and noticing the space. But every game I'm just kind of trying to kind of figuring out the space and seeing when I can get him off and what's the right shot and the wrong shot.
Yeah, knocking down 4 last night. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, look, we were talking about this at the beginning of the season where we say he needs to take more threes. No one's saying he needs to be Steph Curry.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't need 8 to 10. It'd be great. But
there's going to be a balance there.
But if he can knock down 4 to 5 a night, that's going to be
even 2 or 3. If he can average 2.
Yeah. Well, I'm greedy. I want 4 to 5. But that's my point. The point is there. It's there. He had a couple of shots that were there and it went rimmed in and out. So the point is, here's why I say 4 or 5. Is it plausible to take 1 3 a quarter if I'm Brandon Ingram?
Yeah.
Let's say you make
take
it.
one, yeah.
There you're 4.
Sure. I'm not. We'd have to make all of them though for it to be 4
that's what I'm saying, though. It's like it's just a 3 a quarter, and if you make them, let's say he takes 2 or 3 a quarter and makes one of those, there's your 4 to 5 a game is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
So it's why, like, to me, it's not. It's almost like when we talk about double-digit rebounds for Zion. I'm like, there's no reason that guy shouldn't get 2 rebounds a quarter.
Right.
You know, you're already at 8. I mean, it's just if he gets 1 or 2 extras in the quarter, you're at 10. I need 2 boards a quarter. That's in an entire quarter. So I just look at it from that perspective to where I think he can do that. But good takes so far early on in the season through 7 games. Let's see what takes place tonight. All right, so let's get into that. Jim, you got the Trailblazers tonight. Then we'll get your player to watch going into it. But what do you think of the Trailblazers tonight, this game?
I mean, I thought that their veteran guys were super impressive against the Pelicans in the late October weekend series where they played 2 games against them. Jeremy Grant averaged 31 points a game against the Pelicans. I know, no disrespect to him, but his stats in the other games that he's played are way lower than that. I thought Anthony Simons was great in terms of just passing and scoring against the Pelicans. DeAndre Ayton, it seems like he always plays well against New Orleans and was very good in that series as well. So, I mean, the Pelicans have their hands full. New Orleans was much closer to a full-strength roster when they played the Trailblazers out there than they're going to be tonight. And it was a chore just to get a split in those 2 games. So, I mean, I definitely think that the Trailblazers, despite, people predicting them to be near the bottom of the West standings, definitely have the Pelicans' attention based on the way that those 2 games went. I mean, I'm sure by the time most people hear this will know whether Zion is playing or not. The injury report deadline is 1 p.m. on the second game of back-to-back, so I'll usually see it at like 12:30, 12:45. But obviously that would be huge if he's able to play tonight as well. Otherwise, it's going to still be a situation where the Trailblazers can focus a lot on trying to take Brandon Ingram out of the mix. And he also, by the way, I don't think he played very well in those 2 games against Portland. He shot 41% from the field. He averaged 17.5 points a game, which is way down from what he usually does. But he also did make the game winner in the game, that Friday game against Portland, to win that by 2. So Jordan Hawkins, I think, also will be huge tonight in terms of what he can do against the Trailblazers, and in an infinitely bigger role now and responsibility than what he had in the second and third game of the regular season when they played Portland before.
All right. Give me a player to watch this week.
Yes, that's also going to be Jordan Hawkins, partly because of the competition this week. They're playing Portland, which I just touched on. Anthony Simons is, I think an underrated guard, somebody that, not sure if Hawkins is going to be matched up against him directly, but a key guy for the Trailblazers. Then, obviously, the rest of this week, they play Cleveland on Wednesday, and then they're at Orlando on Friday. We'll see if Hawkins gets matched up against Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland. I mean, one of the better backcourts in the NBA. The Cavaliers are off to an incredible start so far. They're 7-0. They play Milwaukee again on Monday night. They could be 8-0 coming into the Smoothie King Center on Wednesday. And then Friday, the game against Orlando, the Magic just lost Paolo Banchero for a while. Yeah. He's going to be out with an injury, which stinks to see because, man, he was tearing it up.
He had a 50-point
game against Indiana. But the Magic have, one of the better defensive guards in the league of Jalen Suggs. So there's a bunch of different big-time challenges for Jordan Hawkins in terms of who the Pelicans are playing against this week. But also just I'm so interested to continue watching Hawk to see the strides that he keeps making of going from sporadically playing last season in and out of the rotation to okay, now you're a key reserve at the beginning of this season to now you're a lot of nights, like Sunday night, you're like the second or third option in the offense. So, I mean, a lot's on him as well, just like there is with Brandon Ingram. But to me, he's responded extremely well to that in just his second year in the NBA.
Yeah, I love it. And he had this to say after the game last night about not just adding the three-point shot, but he wants to do more.
I mean, it's just something you're asked of as a guard, period. So I'm happy to be able to do that, be able to create my own shot. It's a big thing for me. I think that's a big thing going down the line for me if I want to take that next step. So I'm just going to work on it as much as possible. I can see I'm getting better at it. I had one miss slip up. I was just playing with the ball too much, lost the ball. I got to try to limit stuff like that, just get quick into my move and try to get to my spot. So.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Trailblazers tonight. The Cavaliers going into tonight's action, Jim, undefeated at 7-0. Orlando on Friday, and then Brooklyn, who's been playing really well, coming to town on Sunday.
Yeah, they've been. I think that's Monday, the following Monday.
I lost track of days.
It's okay, man.
Yeah.
It's okay. There's a lot of games and a lot of dates to remember. Yeah, they're going to have the whole entire weekend off, at least from games. But then Brooklyn on Monday, yeah. They've had some surprising wins. I mean, they beat Milwaukee. I forget who else they beat recently, but I mean, they're one of those teams where people were like, they're going to win 18, 20 games this season. But if you look at the way they've played so far, it's another team that the Pelicans have on their schedule where it's like, you're going to have to be ready to play these guys because they are way more competitive than a lot of people projected.
No doubt. Jim Eichenhofer, give him a follow over on X, Jim_Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com. And of course, road games, he's in studio with us. Home games, he's after and post game, he's all over the place. I don't know if you signed up for all of that, by the way, when you took the job.
I think there is some documentation somewhere, but I don't remember.
On you. We love Jim here, we love Jim there, we love Jim everywhere.
No, it was fun. It's been fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun, honestly, being in the concourse before the game, watching people walk by and saying hello to some people and kind of getting a nice
very popular
feel for the crowd. I like that part of it because it kind of just gets you ready for the game, and it reminds me.
You want to do it again Wednesday? You want to do it Wednesday?
Sure.
We'll do it Wednesday.
Yeah, let's do it.
You won't be able to miss Jim. He'll be the one with the sunglasses. Give a little bit to you. That's good. I love it.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it. That'll be a good time.
We'll see you back here on Wednesday for the podcast, and then Wednesday before the game, Pelicans warm up. We'll do it out there in the concourse. Until then, we'll see you next time on New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast